Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Uh, so I did the video yesterday on Joyce's sort of where we met, and we met at KFAI and those mixed CDs. And I wanted to do you're talking about her music, and I've kind of thought about it again. And I think I will. I'm not showing any physical stuff in this video. I will actually try to fully organize, fully alphabetize together and consolidate her collection. Try to show it. So it may be Gonna be pro. I'm not going to be sharing so much in the carrying bridge. I don't know, but because I get the sense it's really only for like YouTube and music people. But whatever. I will. It may be a long series of videos. It may take many weeks because she has over 1,000 records, and then she has her CDs, of course, too. But also maybe some of the other things that she has, the monkey stuff especially. So because we're gonna be parting ways with a lot of it. Her friend Michael's gonna be getting it. So, but not all of it. I'm not sure. Most of it though, of the music, physical music. So instead, in this video, I'm just going to do, and I made this outline, talk about her taste in music. So obviously, her favorite musician was Michael Nesmith of the Monkees and his solo career. And the Monkees were her favorite band, obviously, in the TV show. But she didn't discover them until 1987. So she grew up, music was one of her biggest things. And she got a lot of favorites, although I think her taste in music largely was more about songs than like albums. Because like when the Monkees album's Good Times came out, she actually came to conclude that might be the her favorite or the best Monkees, at least her favorite album. I don't know if she ultimately really felt that way. I think she probably would. I don't know. That's a good question. I and like many fans love and think maybe Pisces, although I'm not versed in the Monkees catalog super well, but I mean I've listened to most of the records. But Pisces or Headquarters, maybe one of those two. Not the Bird and the Bee necessarily, not Head, and not the first two necessarily. Yeah, she probably would lean toward. I think she really did because Pisces has a bunch of tracks that were Nesmith and um, has it's a great record. I mean, even Pleasant Valley Sunday's on it. She was sort of lukewarm at best of Pleasant. I think she got a little sick of Pleasant Valley Sunday, but she didn't like hate Pleasant Valley Sunday the way she kind of learned had to deal with hating like songs like Daydream Believer and some others. Auntie's Musical Court and all this stuff, but I'll just talk about like she likes songs more than albums, and because she listened to Casey Kasem and she watched a lot of MTV as a kid. It was really more about songs and 80s pop songs especially. But she still had favorites. Um, I'd say that, one of her early favorites was Hall& Oates, and she has a big Hall& Oates collection I'll be showing down the road. That was way before the Monkees and and like you think about 80s pop especially, Michael Jackson, she was very big Michael Jackson fan and the Jackson 5. Michael Jackson maybe more so, but and she loved Whitney Houston, she loved Madonna. She has a very big Madonna and Whitney Houston collection. Janet Jackson, of course, as well. Prince. I always felt that, yeah, she was. I always thought that she was a bigger Michael Jackson fan than Prince fan, but she still was a pretty big Prince fan. Um, so you go through the 80s pop, and then probably her biggest artist of the 80s, and biggest artist from that era, even though as much as she loved all of these, including Hall& Oates. It's kind of, you could say maybe rivaling Hall& Oates would be the combination of Wham and George Michael. She absolutely adored George Michael, though she did not like Father Figure, the song Father Figure, but George Michael, or Jorge Miguel, as she would always refer to him as, um, was her favorite, and Wham, of course. So she used to say like the whole rivalry between people that she went to school with. You were either a Wham fan or a Tears for Fears fan. She's like, I'm Team Wham. I'm Team Jorge Miguel. She was a massive George Michael fan and his solo work. And in fact, her favorite George Michael album was not Faith. It wasn't even Listen Without Prejudice. It was older, actually. The album from the 90s. So, um, but and of course George Michael did the Freddie Mercury tribute. He did these duets with Whitney Houston, with Aretha Franklin, with Elton John. He did all these duets with people, and he had like ties to like Motown. He grew up with that. So Joyce used to tell me about how the music I like, it didn't have soul. She leaned towards soul, music you could dance to. Um, she did not focus much at all. Sometimes a little bit, but on the instrumentation, the musicianship necessarily. It was really about the vocal, the sort of the hook. Oftentimes, could you dance to it? Did it have something that would kind of move her, give her kind of a rhythm to it? Not all of that, but so moving on with some of the other stuff she really liked. Her first concert actually was Alvin and the Chipmunks. She loved animated stuff and like kids kind of stuff from her era, especially. And I grew up and used to watch Alvin and the Chipmunks on like Saturday morning cartoons, and so I know about that. And of course, like the voices were sped up like the Chipmunks did, but that was her first concert. She went to a lot of concerts, not as many as I did, but she did go to a lot of concerts. I never really was able to catalog like all the concerts, although she went to, I'd say north of at least probably close to 30 or more Monkees and Michael Nesmith related concerts, but many others she went to many times. Like she saw she saw Josh Rouse and Mayor Hawthorne. I saw them both many times, probably over 10 times, more than 10 times a piece actually. Um, but that was more modern stuff. I mean, the 90s and 80s. I mean, she saw Bon Jovi once. She saw some of her favorite artists from the 90s. Like I'll be going over in just a minute or two here. So, but yeah, like she was a fan of REO Speedwagon. She wasn't into like Styx. She liked yacht rock, but she wasn't into Styx or Kansas or Boston, any of those bands. But she did like REO Speedwagon. She liked Air Supply actually. The band that had the all the ballads in the early 80s that were on the charts from Australia. The Pointer Sisters I put down. We did see the Pointer Sisters at the Minnesota State Fair. I don't know, about 10 years ago. Good show. So then a lot of like 80s pop and like R&B, New Jack Swing kind of stuff. I don't know if it's exactly related, but the likes of like DeBarge and New Edition. She was a big Bobby Brown fan and New Edition fan. Um, Band called Climax, who I hadn't heard of until I met her with a K L Y M M A X X. She really liked the like stuff from the. She had her favorites from the '70s too, the Raspberries, and then later Eric Carmen, both of those. And like for the '60s, like, she was probably discovering this because she was born in 1975, probably in the '70s, like the late '70s or early, like mid '80s. The Kinks and the Doors. She didn't like a lot of like British invasion stuff. She wasn't a Beatles fan. She wasn't a Rolling Stones fan. She really wasn't that much of. She liked a little bit of the Zombies, I think, but eh, a lot of that stuff. The Beach Boys, she wasn't a fan of. So the '60s, you know, early like you could say early, not early rock and roll, but '60s British invasion and like rock and roll. You could say she picked her spots. She was more into Motown, like the Temptations or Aretha Franklin or that kind of stuff. She did like Queen, although she leaned more toward the '80s Queen than the '70s Queen. But she did like Queen. She appreciated Freddie Mercury as a vocalist, especially. Um, he also had sort of a tendency to appreciate LGBTQ singers. Diana Ross was one of them. I don't know how much of a Supremes fan, but I think she liked Diana Ross more. She liked Chic. Then like there's Yacht Rock. She really appreciated. I mean, she watched the Yacht Rock series on YouTube long before I had, but that was actually I guess on VH1 initially. But it was really good. She was liking a lot. She loved Michael McDonald. Michael McDonald, the Blue-Eyed Soul vocalists were a big part of what she loved with music. She just happened to find these white dudes that could sing like they sounded like they were black, just they had that soulful R&B style. Michael McDonald was probably her favorite, but she liked a lot of them. Kenny Loggins, also, of course, McDonald, that yacht rock thing. Loggins, of course, also did so many songs that were soundtracks. I talk about my rock and roll Hall of Fame rant. All those soundtrack songs, she knew basically all of them. Christopher Cross, of course, who did work with Michael McDonald on, what was it, Ride Like the Wind, I think. I think that was the song, but he had several songs that were popular that I talked about him at one point in one of my '80s videos, like late '70s, those albums of the year series. But yeah, Christopher Cross was also one she really appreciated. She liked Billy Joel. I don't know if it was more '70s or '80s, probably a little more '80s, but because again, her tendency was to sort of latch onto knowing the songs from the '80s more. But I think she liked some of his stuff, but she did not like Piano Man. She didn't like Only the Good Die Young, but the likes of she actually liked Billy Squire, which is weird because Billy Squire was more of like a guitar. He wasn't a virtuoso, but he was more of a yeah, like a classic rock artist, but she actually really liked him. I don't know if it was the vocal style or what, just kind of his songs had a groove to them. A lot of them did, till he had that sort of incident where he basically got canceled by MTV on that video. But let's see, Luther Vandross. We just saw a documentary about him. Was it last year? Year before? It was last year. Cool in the Gang. I mentioned Aretha Franklin. Of course, she had hits in the '80s too. She did like some Tears for Fears. Everybody wants to rule the world. That's the one she would always reference the most. But that and Shout, I guess. But ELO. When I met her, I thought she was a massive ELO fan. I thought, oh, there's one band sort of progressive she likes, but she liked the pop ELO. While she didn't like the Beatles, she did like Jeff Lynne and ELO, and I don't know particularly why she maybe she felt like he needed her support, and of course the Beatles, everyone likes the Beatles, they didn't need her support. I don't know. George Benson, who had ties to yacht rock, Chicago, she actually probably liked. I'm pretty sure she leaned more toward the '80s Chicago, the Peter Cetera led era, but the Alan Parsons Project, we saw them on live a few years ago. That song "Games People Play," of course, has got Alan Parsons Project. He's had a lot of different singers. He sings that much himself, but the Jets, who were a local Minnesota band, but they had a few pretty big hits in the '80s. Were a band that she frequently would. She's got some of their music in her collection. Lisa and Cult Jam, Lisa Stanfield, Karen White, Lips Incorporated, another local Minnesota band that had that song "Funky Town" that was a hit. The Go Go's, the Bangles, and here's a big one. Was a huge Sade fan. So when I show her collection, I'll be showing a lot of Sade. She unfortunately never got to see Sade in concert. But I'm told her like the bucket list items was see Sade, but she doesn't tour that much. I mean, she didn't like Kate Bush. She was very adamant about it. She didn't like Bjork either. Weird music generally. People who were weird generally didn't do much for her, but Sade was very sophisticated and she had the kind of soul and the blend of genres. She crossed over. Um, Minnie Riperton. Let's see here. Joan Jett. She even went to an Iggy Pop concert once. I think she liked the Iggy's biggest hit. You know, get the name of Let's Go whatever it's called, Let's Go Lies or whatever it's called. So that's kind of the early stuff that she was into for the most part. I'm probably not including everything, but late '80s, that's when she discovered the Monkees. But include some other names in here like Robert Palmer. She was a very big Robert Palmer fan. I'll be showing more of that stuff. And Rick Astley. I know he became like the Rick rolled punchline for a while there, but now he's been kind of more respected. She loved Rick Astley beyond Never Gonna Give You Up or whatever. Bobby Brown, Bon Jovi, Weird Al Yankovic, Huey Lewis and the News. I kind of bonded with her a little bit with Huey, though she liked certain songs more than I did. Like I liked the four album. She liked more of this like the sports album and that song Heart and Soul especially. The Doobie Brothers, of course. She did like some Police and some Sting. Not massive, but actually I mentioned to her after we saw Peter Gabriel. She likes a little Peter Gabriel too. Because she was kind of not crazy about going to that Peter Gabriel show. It's like I don't know if I'm doing it again. It's like, well, did you see Sting at some point? She's like, yeah, maybe. But Paula Abdul was another big artist in the late '80s. She got into like a lot of people, the pop art. She had several hits on those first couple records on Forever Your Girl, especially. Stevie Nicks, Spandau Ballet a little bit, Foreigner, Lionel Richie, Culture Club. So these are kind of within the '80s. And I mean, again, I'm not sure when she got into sort of older music, whether it was the '80s or '90s or even when she was a little kid in the '70s. The Whispers, the Chi-Lites, Bill Withers, Lou Rawls, and Sheila E., of course, with all the Prince connections. So moving on to the '90s, of course, she got even more. George Michael was still a favorite, her Jorge Miguel, but she got into a lot of solo artists. She didn't like bands. She didn't like too many egos. Leave your youth. Too many collaborations. Just want the solo artists. So she got into Chris Isaak. Katie Lang was a huge favorite of hers. In fact, Katie Lang came here and played all of Ingenue, and she missed the show, and she was just depressed about it. She kind of blamed me, like, why do you tell me? It's like, I don't keep tabs on Katie Lang. Bobby Caldwell, although he's more known for like the '70s and early '80s, I guess. Suzanne Vega, Sheryl Crow, of course. Pretty big Sheryl Crow fan from the '90s stuff. Early mid 2000s when she went more in like country, she was kind of jumping ship. Liz Phair, Spice Girls. she was a massive Spice Girls fan. She wanted to go to England to get more of their records that we couldn't find here. Yeah, huge. I'll be showing a lot of Spice Girls, and of course, George Michael was the godfather to one of the daughters of, I think it was one of the daughters of one of the Spice Girls, and basically is inheriting like his whole estate or a lot of his estate. George Michael was so good about charities and contributions. I mean, he obviously was a multi-millionaire, but Rufus Wainwright, loved him. Not much for Loudon. I don't even know for Martha, but Rufus, gay man, who could sing falsettos, did a cool cover of Hallelujah, just like Jeff Buckley. Duncan Sheik. I came to learn this more recently. She got his record on Record Store Day a few years ago, but yeah, it was one of her favorites in the 90s. And Vogue, TLC, a lot of the sort of R&B soul acts from that were the girl groups. TLC, Jodeci. She was into the Cardigans, who I knew back in the 90s a little bit too. Ricky Martin, living La Vida Loca. She was into ABBA. I don't know if it was the 80s or 90s she got into them, but Mariah Carey, the Carpenters. Again, I'm not certain of the time frame of the Carpenters. It might have been earlier. But she was a big Mariah Carey fan. We have a lot of Mariah Carey records from her up there. Um, the Mavericks, Raul Malo. Britney Spears a little bit. The early stuff, I think. She more was into like Destiny's Child. Not as much into Beyonce though. But Gwen Stefani more so than No Doubt. Lenny Kravitz, she saw Lenny Kravitz, got like hit by some guy or something, and then the security saw it or got spilled a drink on her. She got to go backstage and meet Lenny Kravitz while her friend Rhonda was looking for her and couldn't find her at the Myth Club in the early 2000s. I think it was early 2000s. Patsy Cline, while she loved Katie Lang was kind of like, in some ways, being highly influenced by Patsy, but Patsy Cline, the artist from the 60s, I think maybe when she got into Patsy or Katie Lang, it kind of brought her into Patsy Cline. I don't know. I'm not certain on that chronology, but of the early sort of country acts from the 60s or late 50s, early 60s, Patsy was her favorite. Great voice. I know she liked Ben Folds to some degree. Ace of Base. And Delight, of course, everyone knows Groove Goes Over the Heart. That was a song she played regularly, and she's got on vinyl up there. Semisonic, local guy, Dan Wilson, they had the hit with Closing Time, of course. And locally, Chris Koza and Rogue Valley. She wasn't really that into a lot of local music other than like the Jets and some of the Minneapolis sound, beyond Prince. She did like both more the time and, oh, I forgot about Alexander O'Neal. So she liked some of that stuff, but probably post 80s, not much local music. A little bit, but not too much. So moving on to the 2000s, one of the biggest she got into, I think it was around that time. She saw That Thing You Do, but I don't know if she knew that was actually Adam Schlesinger. But Fountains of Wayne became one of her favorites. And a band, actually. They were sort of the heir apparent to the Monkees in some ways for bands, them and Hall & Oates, because most of her favorites were not bands. I mean, Wham was a band, but most of her favorites were solo acts, especially at that point. But she also got into Adam's other projects, Ivy and Tinted Windows. And even Adam Schlesinger's Beyond That Thing You Do, he wrote that song, that the theme song for that movie in the mid-90s. He did all the music for My Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and then later he ended up producing the last two Monkees albums. So that was a big deal when she found out, oh, maybe some of the Monkees fans will discover my band, Fountains of Wayne. She loved Fountains of Wayne. Franz Ferdinand, especially like their first or second record. The same thing with like Keane and there's one other on this list. I'm not. Keane, Franz Ferdinand. Oh, and Maroon 5. She liked like the first two Maroon 5s. I don't know if like Adam Levine's like solo stuff and the later Maroon 5 did much. There was like one or two songs, like that song Move Like Jagger, I think she liked. But generally it was the early Maroon 5 she was really into. Jamie Lydell, like sort of a soul R&B artist. She was into some Justin Timberlake. Elliott Smith. She was a very big Elliott Smith fan. And I want to get more into him. I mean, I've always kind of leaned toward that, but I think she has some Elliott Smith up there, mostly on CD though. Death Cab for Cutie, she kind of liked Ben Gibbard a bit, and of course he wrote a song for the Monkees on Good Times. Feist, who I knew from Broken Social Scene, but the solo act from Canada. Nika Costa, R&B artist. I didn't meet her in time to really see her with Nika. She saw Nika Costa one or two times live, but it was just before I met her. It was like the late 2000s. She and him, Zoe Deschanel and M. Ward. I never could get into Zoe's voice, but she's got a bunch of she and him releases upstairs, like mostly CDs. Josh Rouse. Now Josh Rouse was a really big deal to her. She discovered him from some suggestion, some guy from soundtrack for Vanilla Sky, and I I think it was either Nashville or the one before 1972. And she's like, "Where the hell has this guy been my whole life?" Soul act a little bit like Paul Simon, but like with a funk and groove to some of his songs. And I've become a pretty big Josh Rouse fan myself. We saw him together probably 7, 8 times. The 2000s albums especially, but he's had a couple of records of the last 15 years that are decent. If he comes to the Dakota, I will definitely go again. But we saw him at the Dakota like 4 or 5 times and saw him. I probably saw him almost 9 or 10 times myself with her. But yeah, Josh Rouse was a really big name in the 2000s and the 2010s. Robin Thicke, of course, has become well known, son of the late Alan Thicke, but became well known for Blurred Lines, of course, and that controversial video or sequence with Miley Cyrus and sort of the lyrics. But and it kind of borrowed from a Marvin Gaye song, which she was a fan of Marvin Gaye, but she liked the earlier Robin Thicke stuff, I guess, not the stuff when he was doing kind of the like the jam band kind of 90s stuff, but like in the early 2000s. I can't remember what era exactly, but of course he became known for Masked Singer. But yeah, Robin Thicke, another blue-eyed soul artist that would be along the same lines of some of these others that I'm about to name. Mayer Hawthorne, like Josh Rouse, probably arguably like rivaled maybe her favorite artist of the 2010s, especially in the late 2000s. I saw him many times and still follow him. He's got a bunch of side projects, one specifically Tuxedo that she loved too. But yeah, Mayer highly influenced early stuff by Motown, and she loved that about him. He was attractive, tall, dark, and handsome. He used to do these videos on YouTube going to thrift stores showing clothes he would buy, and then also food like restaurants. What am I having for lunch today with Mayer? It was the early Mayer Hawthorne. In fact, she continually gave me crap about the concert that was the greatest concert of her life, maybe that or the Nesmith show where she met Nesmith, but probably Mayer Hawthorne and Chromeo. I'm about to mention at First Avenue in the fall of 2011. I actually had gone to like 3 concerts in 4 nights, and I just couldn't go again. She met Mayer. There was barely anyone who knew about him then at First Avenue, and so she got to talk to him. It's like, "Where's your boyfriend? He's missing out." She was wearing these earrings. There's photos from it. She reminded me of that. How it was the greatest show, like between Mayer and Chromeo. Um, but yeah, Mayer's great. Was a huge favorite. Although in the last 5 to 10 years, she hasn't been as crazy about Mayer's music. A little bit. She liked Rare Changes, but she feel like because he got married, he and now as a kid, he kind of has his art has maybe not been as good. But yeah, she loved a lot of Mayer, and I've gotten to know Mayer Hawthorne. Music Soul Child was on that mix. Yeah, another R&B soul artist from the 2000s mostly and 2010s. I'm not. I probably haven't spent enough time with it, but that was one of her favorites. Music Soul Child played 2 different years, the last couple of years at the Dakota, but it was like back-to-back nights, standing room only. It was, and the tickets were not cheap, so we didn't make it. Unfortunately, I wish we could have seen him with her. Maybe I'll find a way to get to one of the Music Soul Child shows at some point. The Bird and the Bee, of course. The duo. I'm blanking on the name, Mama. I'm forgetting the names. Inara George and the guy who's worked with Adele, the producer guy. Yeah, we even saw Inara George a couple times, but her partner didn't tour with. She didn't do a lot of touring. It's kind of like Brian Wilson. He's just a producer. So, but yeah, she really liked the Bird and the Bee. She got a bunch of their vinyl records, a couple of them on Record Store Day a few years back. Self, who's one of my favorites. A previous relationship, she had been introduced to them and liked Self's cover of What a Fool Believes. It's Matt Mahaffey. I've talked about Self, of course, but Joyce did like some Self, not as nearly as much as I did, but yeah, Self. Kylie Minogue's another one. I'm not sure if it was 90s or 2000s. But she was a Kylie Minogue fan. Outcast, a guy named AM who I think opened for, it was either Josh Rouse or maybe Mayer Hawthorne, but and AM worked with this guy named Sean Lee, and I heard that, but I never heard the first AM release that she was really into. And then Robert Randolph from Family Band, I know she was into as well, though not when I was with her so much. I think she saw him live. I saw him live a couple times, but she did too. He's covered Billie Jean from Michael Jackson and everything. So moving on to the 2010s, she still was really into Mayer Hawthorne. I think it was more of that period of time she got into Chromeo. And those were like probably her 2 favorite sort of acts, maybe along with Josh Rouse over the last 15 years. She was into a lot of other stuff, but those are like the spotlights. She still continued to be into Mayer and then Chromeo. Fits in the Tantrums. She was into them for a while. She kind of felt like they got more popular and they were kind of getting their songs and commercials. Their music suffered, but the first couple records, especially, although they're a lot like Mayer Hawthorne, we were wondering if they could like tour together. We asked, I forget the singer's name for Fits. But yeah, the early Fits and the Tantrum she was really into. And in fact, when we were trying to get tickets to them and they sold out, she was just like irate, like, "Am I ever gonna see this band?" She was into Lizzo for a fair amount of time in the late 2010s and the last few years. Um, Men, Women, and Children and Unfulfilled Giants. I guess I introduced her to them right when we met, one offs, but Timmy Sean's another one. So a lot of the music she got into in the 2010s, the new music at least, I introduced her. Not all of them. I mean, I'm not including maybe everything, so I'll have to follow up with some of this stuff. But Timmy Sean, even she liked some Ben Sinister. She got more into Toto, a little bit more into Toto. Some of the concerts we end up seeing, like America and some of the yacht rock stuff, I think she was getting more into over the last like 5 to 10 years, especially seeing that documentaries, that little parody thing, and then some of the people like in that, like Jeff Davis from Whose Line Is It Anyway, who's live, is actually in the yacht rock series. And Kimbra, of course, she was into the early Kimbra. We even had Miracle played at our wedding from the second Kimbra album. She kind of jumped ship on Kimbra about 6, 7 years ago, basically after hearing her third album, and I'm kind of sadly leaning toward the same. But yeah, especially Vows she loved. Um, so then the 2020s during COVID, especially, a couple artists really were her jam. Jessie Ware, who we'd gotten into the 2010s, but she put out that record, What's Your Pleasure, I think it was. I think was the one, that one or the one after it. She was addicted to. We never got to see her live for that music, unfortunately, but maybe I'll have the chance to. Recently, the last few years, Dua Lipa. She kind of, even though those two were kind of rivals, but she got into, especially with the Barbie movie. She loved the Barbie movie and the music for it especially. So she became a Dua Lipa fan. Then Silk Sonic and Bruno Mars and Lady Gaga last year with Die With a Smile. She was addicted to that song, the Silk Sonic record. Um, yeah, Bruno Mars unfortunately got more of the attention than Mayor Hawthorne. This came up around the same time, so I was having kind of reservations with Bruno Mars, and she kind of did, but she kind of softened on that when she heard Silk Sonic. Very retro R&B and soul music in the 70s. And recently she wanted to get into Sly and the Family Stone. We did see the documentary on Sly, but I think if she had continued to be here, she probably would have gotten more into Sly and the Family Stone. Yeah, I mean, there's probably several names I didn't include on here. This is an incomplete list, but this is the gist of her music taste. It wasn't just Monkees and Michael Jackson and Katie Lang. She had a bevy, and then again, this is probably just like 2/3. I will try and do is I will try to see if I can do this. I have all her records alphabetized individually in the crate, but I don't have them all consolidated, so I have to kind of go through them and do that. And she, unlike myself even, she has large numbers of separate, like specific artists. Like she may have like 20 or 30 Prince records. Or Robert Palmer, she probably has 13 Robert Palmer records. Whereas, even though she was a song person, but she also had a lot of singles, like a lot of 7-inch singles, way more than I did. So this could be a series of videos I'll be doing in her tribute and honor for a while now, showing her collection. But at some point, that collection isn't going to be in this home, so I gotta kind of maybe try doing that sooner than later. I don't know. I'll have to find a way to make these videos, and I'm still kind of frustrated with the camera situation. But unfortunately, at the moment, though, the record room that I normally film in is kind of being redone. It's used as a storage area for some stuff to. I mean, to be honest, it's a lot of her stuff and some of my stuff needing to be moved temporarily. So there's no really way to film, and even it's not even that easy to access and find a lot of the stuff that I wanted to do for this video. But yeah, to understand Joyce's taste in music, I mean, genre-wise, yeah, she loved pop music especially, probably number one pop music, but soul and R&B, and a little bit of rock music. Very kind of rock music was like fourth, fifth, sixth in the sort of, and she didn't like heavy metal. I mean, you consider like Bon Jovi or maybe a little Def Leppard. That's not really metal, but she didn't like metal and progressive rock or prog really wasn't her forte after learning about it from me for the most part. Granted, she was kind of taken aback by the fact that some of the music she liked sort of had connections. The fact that Daryl Hall had an album produced or had Robert Fripp play on, and get involved with an album from Daryl Hall because she loved Hall and Oates, of course. She didn't really care, but or like Todd Rundgren, of course he had his pop and his progressive stuff. Like XTC, yeah, that Andy Partridge wrote a song for the Monkees, but a couple songs, but weird music didn't, like her taste in music and her taste in like things. She wanted things linear. generally, and she didn't like things too weird. Although at the same time, she definitely liked things to not be simple or boring. So it was like a weird kind of. She used to say, "I just have high standards," and that was kind of it for Joyce. It wasn't that she wouldn't understand the sort of skill and talent that it would take. Part of also with a lot of this stuff, like in metal and prog, she liked to be represented, and she being a woman of color, a Latin woman, but also she connected, and she definitely leaned toward bonding with the black community. Not in so much maybe the Asian community somewhat, but people of minorities and LGBTQ, I whatever when they were of that ilk, like I told her, like Rob Halford's gay, Doug Pinnick of King Dex gay, she at least appreciated that about them. She wouldn't necessarily like their music, but oftentimes, like so, I didn't even mention Sylvester. She was a pretty big fan of Sylvester. She may have some Sylvester stuff, you know. That was part of it is identity and relating to the people making the music themselves. Was kind of a big deal. I mean, Katie Lang being a lesbian didn't hurt. She liked her music, but didn't have hurt the fact that Katie Lang also was part of that sort of and she was kind of Katie Lang was kind of not disowned, but the country community when she came out, I guess it wasn't that well received, and so she kind of sympathized with Katie Lang. So there was a lot of those kind of things. I think she liked Katie Tunstall as well. I used to get Katie Lang and Katie Tunstall mixed up, but pretty sure she did because and like you just in general like 80s and a little bit of 90s, maybe most for like nostalgia and how much she consumed it. Um, were a big part of her sort of taste in music. It's like if it's from the 80s, at least I might know it. It was hard to stump her about some band from the 80s unless it was a rock song or something like that. She didn't know Rush. She didn't know Marillion. She only knew Owner of a Lonely Heart from Yes. She knew the 80s Genesis and Phil Collins, of course. She did like Phil Collins. Although she used to say he doesn't have soul though. Even though he did the Motown covers and the one hit with You Can't Hurry Love, that was a cover of that, but she liked Phil Collins as a singer, and she liked the 80s. She didn't like the 70s Genesis, Peter Gabriel Genesis. I don't like. She liked actually a few Peter Gabriel songs. She knew them. Sung Steam mostly, but mostly Digging in the Dirt. She loved that song. Of course, Sheryl Crow covered it a couple of years ago, and she just was it last year, I think. She didn't really like it as much as Peter Gabriel's. It was weird, but yeah, that her identity as a music fan was largely with a lot of that stuff. I mean, she was open to like hearing stuff at points, but and I think her tastes were kind of narrowing at points. She did discover some of those artists in the 2020s, and maybe a few of them I'm not even remembering. But as a whole, she was kind of leaning toward. We'd listen to Casey Kasem on Sundays like it is today. The 80s, the 80s were her favorite, and she listened to Cool and Await. Locally here, they would run Casey Kasem on Saturday mornings, but they've been incorporating 90s. At one point, Cool and Await didn't even play 80s music. Later that she did briefly listen to 89.3 The Current, but then KUWZ, the Cows, they run Casey Kasem. Their actually playlists really fit a lot of Joyce, not all of it. They have like a 90s and early 2000s some stuff like alternative rock and stuff like that she didn't care for, but she did appreciate they would play a lot of 80s pop and even occasionally like some 70s stuff like Eric Carmen or like 10cc's I'm Not in Love, stuff like it's like I said, she liked a lot of individual songs versus even artists. So that's the thing is just kind of scratching the surface about some of the stuff that she like. Was it a song from the 80s that was pop? She knew it. She might have liked it a little bit. Yeah, whatever. Like Benny Mardones or you know, yeah, she liked Aha's Take on Me. I don't think she liked any other Aha songs, which I've grown to like more a few of them. Um, Jake Root, of course, was she used to go to Transmission sometimes with her friends, like Rhonda, I believe. But of course, I've been watching Jake Root on Twitch. It was used to be twice a week, but now it's been once a week when he's not doing a live gig on like Friday or Saturday night, occasionally Sunday. Um, and the Manatee that whole thing. I think part of it was he would play sometimes stuff that were up her alley. I mean Duran Duran, she was a big Duran Duran fan, and Jake Root obsessed with Duran Duran, so that fell within her taste to some degree. Some of the stuff he'd play the alternative, like she liked REM, but like she wasn't into U2 much. She liked one song by U2, Desire. But yeah, Jake has played and has played some of the stuff that was in her wheelhouse. I'm trying to think like Jake would play Sade, so that's why she did actually like Transmission, but he was hit and miss. Sometimes he'd play stuff she didn't care for at all. So and then there were a couple DJs briefly that she liked, like on Radio K, DJ Epic and Grandpa Joe, that playing vinyl because vinyl was her forte. I never really spent much time with vinyl before I met her, and that was right when Record Store Day was sort of getting going and the whole saving record and having to get vinyl. But she would play vinyls regular, and so someone who's can appreciate old vinyl, like older vinyl, like vinyl from the 60s and 70s and 80s, of course, she appreciated on the air. So this guy named Grandpa Joe, and then there was briefly a guy named DJ Epic that also would focus on vinyl, especially older R&B. Like Mayor Hawthorne does a show on YouTube regularly. He used to do it every Thursday night for a while there called Wine and Vinyl. He does it occasionally, do it like once every couple months. And he plays like stuff from the obscure stuff on vinyl from the 70s and early 80s. And she would appreciate it. I'm beginning to appreciate it. A lot of like older stuff. I forgot about. We used to also listen to Ray Richardson on KMOJ on Sunday nights back in the day, and he would feature two artists like Prince versus Michael Jackson, get callers to vote for them and stuff like that. And he would play like Kool and the Gang and the Commodores and all that stuff. She appreciated all that stuff. She would watch documentaries, mostly like older ones from like BET that featured like the Whispers or the Chi-Lites or a lot of like acts from the 70s and 80s, like usually soul acts, soul and R&B acts, Motown acts too. I think they even had the Temptations in there. Temptations were bigger than some of those names, but Joyce kind of gravitates like there's a lot more music out there than just the standards that people know. It's not just about Aretha Franklin or Marvin Gaye. There's Al Green, there's even like she like like Sam and Dave. She's like, oh, it's Sam and Dave. It's like I know the name, but Joyce knew their hits. She was so much better at knowing those hits. Maybe the rest of my life I'm gonna have to try to catch up to her. I don't know if I'll actually get there, but so that's kind of a long-winded 30 some odd minute summarization of Joyce music tastes without props I'm giving. But yeah, I'm gonna see if I can try to make the sort of marathon of videos. We never did that. We did it with mine, but I talked about her, but she didn't have time for YouTube, and she just she had too many things she wanted to do. She didn't care that much. But I will try to sort of not rectify that, but try to honor her in a way that maybe some other people will get to know and really understand what a music geek she was and collector and what's the word? Savant, I guess, would be the best thing for her taste. Her knowledge of music was very vast and very deep, even though she had high standards again, but she knew a ton of music and she collected music for a long time, longer than I did even. When she was like 3-4 years old, she would like lift some of her cousins' little vinyl records of REO Speedwagon and Journey and that kind of stuff, and it's like oh, this is good, I want to listen to this. So music really was her thing. I was into music a little bit when I was younger. Yeah, I was, but it really took me till I was in high school. But Joyce kind of started from almost day one, and music was kind of like her babysitter, along with like watching MTV and other television shows when her mom was working and she couldn't be there with her. So anyway, that's sort of my summary of my wife Joyce's taste in music. But yeah, I guess hopefully people might get something out of this and then the other videos I'll be trying to make. I mean, I do want to start doing some of my own videos at some point. I may, because the vinyl collection and the music collection for her will be, if I'm going to do this, it's going to be like a long haul. It's going to be, mine was like 35, 40 videos. It'll probably be something similar, but I got to actually first get those actually set up and fully alphabetized. But I'll be showing them and asking questions like, I'm not sure where this is from. It says this year, but this Madonna single and this Whitney Houston 7-inch. But anyway, I hope people might have enjoyed this, talking about my wife Joyce. You can go back and watch videos, of course, with her showing stuff on Record Store Day. But thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. I made a bit of an error, I think. I remember now what was her favorite Monkees album. I'm pretty sure it was Present. It might have been. So her favorite Monkees album was either Present, maybe Good Times, or maybe Pisces. But actually, now thinking about it, that was the one. Present was the one. I'll talk more about when I show it. Present was the album that she ended up like going to bat for and defending, and people like instrument play more. Present doesn't have Peter Tork on it though. It's just the three guys because Peter had left the band, I believe. But yeah, Present might be her favorite, or it's like a co-favorite because I didn't even mention that. But anyway, that's something that's a glaring omission that in this video I forgot about.